Welcome. I'm here today with Janice Litvin, who is a burnout expert. And Janice is on a mission to help leaders and teams banish burnout in their organizations so their employees can come to work healthy, happy, and ready to work. She does this through keynote speeches, workshops, and accountability groups. Her best-selling book, Banish Burnout Toolkit, helps you learn how to manage stress to prevent burnout. The result? Long-lasting behavior change. Amen. We love that. What makes Janice unique is her 20 years of technology recruiting, 10 years in IT, her study of psychology, and her experience changing her own behavior. Now, going from stressed out and negative to happy and healthy, let's welcome National Speakers Association member Janice Litvin. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Liza. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I warned you, my first question for everybody is always the same. As a health coach, I talk about our food and lifestyle choices as being either kale because they nourish us or kryptonite because they toxify us. Tell us, what's your kale? What's the one thing you try to do every day because you know, even though it's a tiny thing, it has a really huge impact on your health?
Well, thank you for that question. I love to have oatmeal for breakfast with half a banana every single day, just about. And now I know you're supposed to, the food experts will tell you you're supposed to vary your meals.
But experts, schmexperts.
But I just love oatmeal. It's the warmth, even in the summer, that fill your stomach up with warmth. I take, I think, a quarter cup of dry, old-fashioned oatmeal, not the speed track one, and the water, and then half a banana. I put in a little almond milk or whatever. Sometimes I'll add a few walnuts or something like that, or another fruit. Like in the summer, we've got peaches and nectarines, but I really love that oatmeal every day.
I'm with you. I eat oatmeal almost all year round. And yes, definitely. All right, confession time. What's your kryptonite? What sneaks in sometimes that you know is not the best choice, but there it is.
Well, it's me and my Netflix. So one thing I'm working on is getting better night's sleep every night. So every now and then, maybe once a month or once every couple of weeks, I'll stay up a little too late and then I'm very cranky the next day. And sometimes I just have trouble sleeping, but I'm really working to get in bed at the same time every night and not just spend hours and hours watching Netflix, but either just chatting with my husband as we're falling asleep or maybe reading a real book. Not a book on my phone. Good. I really love
off those
real books.
Off those screens before bedtime.
Yeah.
Any health coach will tell you that. So great. Yes. Well, now we know a little bit more about you. So tell us how you came to be a burnout expert and what you do and what is it exactly you do?
I'll start with what I do. So I do workshops called Banish Burnout, Move from Stress to Success. And these are based on cognitive behavior therapy, which tells us that you can change your reaction to stress from the inside out. So we look at how to interrupt negative thoughts, how to understand those thoughts and where they came from and get them out, because that's the problem. People take stress in, but they don't get it out. We look at typical stress characteristics, which are overreaction and overgeneralization. And then we learn how to reality spin them to question yourself. Did I really need to be that angry when I got rear-ended on the freeway? Yeah, it's a pain in the neck, but how angry do I really need to get? And I have this little joke I tell myself, if no one's in the hospital and no one's legs are broken and no one, God forbid, has passed away, then why get that angry about whatever it is?
I love that criteria. Those three criteria are just great. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of when my kids were little and they, you know, as soon as you get on the phone, they need your attention. And my rule finally became, if there is no blood, I don't need to know about it.
And then the final piece is setting healthy boundaries. It's amazing to me how many people were not taught how to say no. And you asked me about women, and we'll talk more about this later, but especially women are not taught how to say no. So that's the first question you asked. And then the other question you asked is, how did I come to do this? And I was just thinking about this last night as I was thinking about our interview today. I was doing, when I first started doing wellness consulting and training and workshops, I was doing more food because that's one of my specialties, and fitness. I teach Zumba fitness. I love to move. Most people hate exercise. And I'm like, but do you love to have fun? And so if you can combine fun with your fitness and do it with a friend and have it on a regular basis, then you can figure out a way to make it a new habit. And so I was going along doing those workshops, and they were sort of okay, but not that many, not that big a demand for those. And then one day a client called and said, we want you to do a workshop on stress, but we don't want the typical mindfulness practice kind of workshop. We want you to go deep. And I said, are you sure? I can go really, really deep. I went to therapy. So I had some books on cognitive behavior therapy, and I thought this would really tie together all the work I've been doing for myself over the years, things I've been working on recently, because as you know, the layers of the onion get peeled and you go deeper and deeper. And in the recent few years, I had uncovered some things that I wanted to work on for myself, which is why do I always take things so personally and let what other people do or say bother me so much? So anyway, I had done this work on myself. Not that I'm perfect, because I still have work to do, but I put it together in that form in the workshop that I just described, and it had great results. And so I've been doing it ever since.
That's a great story. So what about being a burnout expert and a woman really astonishes and excites you?
Well, tying back to what I said a moment ago, which is most women that I encounter, and I have no stats to back this up, but I've talked to a lot of women, and in all my workshops, there are usually a lot of women in them. And this, I get similar questions every time, which is about pushing back. So I get questions like, I don't know what to say to my boss. He expects me to respond to emails on Sundays. And I'm like, he does? I don't know why I'm always so surprised when I get a question like this, because out here in California, but this kind of stuff goes on in California too, but people are more aware of self-care and treating employees with respect, but there still is that Silicon Valley, brilliant jerk syndrome here. But I'm always surprised when people don't know how to push back. Not that I was perfect at it, but over the years, I learned how to say no. And there are some scripts in my book, and I give scripts in my workshops and different suggestions of ways to handle strange situations like that.
That's really
and women
such an
and
important thing.
To take that one step further, I think you asked me earlier why that particular issue hits women. I think it's because we're raised to be nurturers and we're raised to be caretakers. And when would you ever dream of saying no to your child, right? However, like you said a moment ago, when your child wants something now, do they really need it now?
Right.
Or can you say, I can help you, but it's going to be at 6 p.m. when I'm done with work.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you can take care of whatever this thing is you're worried about yourself. If it's like you said before, if there's no blood, there's no emergency, I don't think you need me right this minute. We can do this later.
Yeah, two things really popped out when you were talking to me, which is, one is, my boss expects me to answer emails on a Sunday. Very often when I dig deeper with clients on something like that, I discover that it's not the boss's expectation. The boss is working on Sunday and sends an email and has no intention that no expectation that you should respond to it. He or she just happens to be working and wants to fire that email off before it slips their mind,
Right.
We receive that email and we immediately layer onto this, oh my gosh, I should be working. I should answer this email. I should take this action. But when you dig deeper, that expectation is not there. We've just created it for ourselves. And I think that really plays into our relationship with our children as well. My big aha moment around that was I came home one day and my husband was standing by the kitchen counter, sort of scrolling through his phone, and the breakfast dishes were still in the sink. And I always left before he did. And I was just like, really? And started bumping stuff around and, being very passive aggressive. And he looks at me and he says, what are you doing? And I said, well, dinner needs to be on the table and I can't cook when there are dishes in the sink. And he said, why does dinner need to be on the table? Like, take some time off between work and home. And
Yeah.
I was just totally speechless, because here I was thinking, he expects me to do this. No, that expectation was not there. I totally put that on myself.
That's an interesting thing about expectations, because sometimes expectations are there. And it's really funny that you said that. We have the opposite in our house. My husband does most of the cooking, and he'll start banging and like, I can't make dinner. And I'm like, this kitchen will be spotless, but it won't be till 7 o'clock tonight. I'm not doing these dishes now. If you want to, you can move them over.
The other thing I was thinking about was that you were saying how you don't have so much of a problem saying no and sticking to it. And I was thinking I had sort of the same experience, but it came over time. Like, as I got older, I was very able to draw boundaries that I never would have drawn when I was 20. And I remember coaching a client who was much younger than me, and she was having this issue of boundaries and trying to, have them and hold them. And her boss did something very inappropriate, and I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, at her age I would have been just as freaked out. At my age I would have been just, oh hell no.
Right.
And I do think that
Right.
comes with age, and I work with a lot of women who are in perimenopause and menopause, and one of the favorite things that I ask them is, like, what's the best part about being this age? And so many of them will say, oh, I just don't take it from anybody anymore.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I remember being younger and always taking it
Yeah.
from bosses.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also I agree with everything you said. And I want to say that some of us have raised a group of enabled kids.
Oh, yes.
And so I'm like, did anybody ever bring you up to be respectful? I'm like, what happened to the respectful button in your head?
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
was like crazy.
Consideration and respect, not high on the list these days. And
Yeah.
sometimes I look at kids acting in a way that I consider inappropriate, and I'm just like, where's this coming from? And then I'll see their parents doing something completely, parking in a no parking space when they're picking their kid up just because that was available. I'm like,
Yeah.
if the rules don't apply to you, why do you think your kids are going to follow the rule?
Right. Right.
Anyway,
Right.
we digress.
Yes. Right.
So the opposite question is, what about being a burnout expert and a woman, and working with women really disturbs and challenges you?
I don't know about disturbing. What I said before is just what some, okay. God, there's so many ways to answer that question. One of my focuses, and this might apply to a future question, but I'll get the ball rolling. As you know, and most of the world knows, frontline healthcare workers have suffered more than anybody else in terms of workers, and except for people who got laid off. And so the suicide rate among doctors was already the highest profession in the world of suicide. And with COVID, it got much, much worse. So I'm working with a few people to try to change the situation. I have this little saying that I invented. It's not so brilliant, but it's burnout is a two-way street. Yes, the individual needs to learn how to change the way they react, but the organization also needs to not have policies and procedures that burn people out. First of all, employees need to be able to have as much control over their work as possible, especially in professional settings. They need to not be overloaded. They need to have reasonable deadlines, or if not, to be able to change those deadlines if the work keeps getting piled on. They need to be treated with respect. They need to be taken seriously, and they need to be listened to, because they're the ones in the trenches who know how things could be better. And so when you have a hospital where a resident works a 48-hour shift, I'm like, we talked about sleep a moment ago, talk about your circadian rhythm being off. Can you imagine a patient knowing that someone's at the end of a 48-hour shift and they're about to do a procedure? Like, and I keep hearing this reference that's kind of quirky. Would you want an airline pilot to take off at the end of a 48-hour shift? I don't think so. Or a bus driver or anybody who's in control. So why the heck do you have it set up for residents to work 48-hour shifts? It makes no sense at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know that when we were talking before the podcast, the first time we spoke, we were talking about the World Health Organization's definition of burnout and saying how this is a work-related syndrome. And it just, that rubs me the wrong way, because it's precisely what you're talking about. It's sort of like, yes, it's work-related, and the person's sleep is not a work thing, right? It's affecting their sleep. It's affecting their nutrition. It's affecting all these things. There's a really weird thing with burnout where, we consider it happening at work, and somehow it's the person's individual responsibility to take care of it. Oh, you need to do self-care. Really? Maybe you need to set up your workplace so that I don't get burned out.
Yes.
It's this really weird, like, kind of work, not work, business, personal, not sure.
The other thing that surprises me, and it kind of goes back to the manager who expected the employee to respond on Sundays, or maybe they didn't. Ariana Huffington has a phrase called "no more brilliant jerks." There are managers, and I'm aware of them from different friends and family members who've had them, and myself, where people are screaming at their employees. I'm like, hello? Yeah. And I read the best comeback line, and I forgot where I read it a few weeks ago. And I was reading a story, and this woman's retort was, "You cannot scream at me. You are not my father. You have not earned that right. You might be angry at something I did, but there's no screaming." But talk about pushing back and setting a boundary. Yeah. Sometimes that person just needs to be like made aware of have you ever heard of emotional intelligence? Like, why are you screaming at people? Because you've gotten away with it. It's not okay to scream at employees ever. Unless they punched you in the stomach or something. I just can't imagine why.
Again, a two-way street, right?
And then there's one other situation I remember. I did a workshop at a software company, oddly, an HR software company in downtown San Francisco a few years ago. And there was a big gym, a big nationwide gym that had a beautiful facility on the street corner. And I happen to know that Zumba instructor who teaches at lunchtime. And I said to the guy, "Why aren't you getting exercise? You can go downstairs. You don't even have to go anywhere. It's right downstairs, and do noontime fitness classes." He said, "We have this unwritten rule here that no one leaves for lunch. People run out and buy their lunch and bring it back." I'm like, what?
Yeah. You know what that's called? That's called eating al desco.
Yeah. I've never heard that before.
Yeah. Right. So if that's the expectation, are you shocked that somebody's burned out? And is that the person's fault for burning out? No, you need to give them a lunch break and give them a break. Like, whether they get lunch or not, they have a break.
So how do you help a group of employees band together? Do they sign a petition and say, "We're not taking this anymore? This is ridiculous"? How do you know? It's just shocking to me that a company would, in this day and age, with all the literature out there about caring for your employees, would still abuse them. It's abuse, in my opinion.
Yeah. So tell us about the workshops that you do. It sounds like you have a lot of good stuff, scripts and things like that. Tell us about those.
Okay, so here's the funny thing. Like I told you the story before of how this workshop came about. What I really love is when I have 90 minutes, because we can dive deep. And actually, client recently asked me to do a 6-hour workshop. Can you imagine 6 hours of talking about burnout? But I'm going to do it with games and improv games and storytelling games and throwing the ball and dancing. We're going to have a lot of fun. But so what I do is I help people understand, to the degree that an employee can care for themselves, given that all the other issues that we've talked about aren't there, or that the organization has admitted they need to do some work and are making changes and communicating with their employees in such a way that they know what changes need to be made. and maybe they've gone to EQ training or whatever. I love to help people understand where their stress comes from. Now, there are parts of the process that are very private, and we don't do those. They're in the book, but we don't do those. But to the degree I can teach people how to stop, take a breath, observe, and proceed, which means in the midst of a stressful situation, do you need to scream like we talked about this before? Is anybody legs broken? Or can you say to yourself, I don't need to be this upset. I'll give you a quick story that illustrates this point. I was going to my son's girlfriend's birthday, a little lunch, just a few people. This was a few years ago, and it was on a Saturday, and I wanted to go to the gym first. And then I called this large grocery store next to the gym to make sure they had the exact right gift card that I knew she wanted. I get to this huge store. They have like 4 rows of gift cards. And the gift cards are this small. So they're not in any kind of order. And I'm going back and forth. And I can't find the darn gift card. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to be late. I still need to go home and change. And I'm feeling myself getting really, really angry. And this is already after I had created my Banish Burnout work. But I started to feel myself get super angry. These people are so stupid. How come they told me they had the card? The card's not here. Now I'm going to lose a bunch of time because I have to go to the front of the store, and I'm going to tell them how I feel. As I'm walking to the front of the store, I said, hold on, wait a minute, stop, follow your own advice. Stop, breathe deeply to calm yourself down. Observe what you're saying. Is anyone in the hospital? No, this is not that important. I started lecturing myself. I said, you're going to put a smile on your face, and you're going to go up to the front and say, hi, how's your day going? And we have a big smile and say, could you please help me? I can't find this particular gift card. The woman was like, sure, here it is. I'm like, oh, okay, I couldn't find it. It wasn't that big a deal. Why was I so angry? Because of the habit patterns that I had grown up with from observing someone, my mother in particular, may she rest in peace, who used to get super angry and scream and yell at anybody and everybody in the grocery store. Yeah. And so it's really hard, everything we grew up with, all those role modeled behavior patterns stay with us no matter how much therapy we've had and how much self-work we've done. The habits are there. And let's say you've broken a leg and you had it repaired, your body still remembers that broken leg. There's still a scar there, even though the bone has been repaired. And the same thing with the emotional scars. They're all still there, waiting to pop out. And it's a constant vigilance to not let this crazy behavior out. Yeah. When you're setting on autopilot, it's really important to stay connected with yourself. And that's what STOP does.
Oh, I love that STOP acronym. And it just reminds me so much of like teaching a small child, when you see this, it's time to stop. You're crossing the street. You're actually teaching people how to cross the street in a different way, right? Don't walk through that stop sign.
I like that. Yeah, it's your own little internal stop sign. Yes.
I love that. Yes, definitely. Okay. So tell us more about your workshops or tell us more about your book, Banish Burnout Toolkit.
Okay, so this is a fun story. I was working on a different book about workplace wellness, and I don't remember what the name was going to be, something like Well Work Days or Working Well, or the word well and the word work were in there somewhere. And I had hired a developmental editor, poor thing. This was dragging on for like 2 or 3 years. And I realized looking back, it's because I was bored. I didn't really have a punchy why for writing the book. I didn't really have an overarching theme of it was just kind of not a textbook, but it was just like, here's step 1 and here's step 2, and here are the things you have to cover. And then one day I was talking to my son, who was 26 at the time, and I had been doing these Banish Burnout workshops. And he was my social media guru, as young people tend to be. And we're chatting, and he said, Mom, why aren't you writing a book called Banish Burnout? And I was like floored that it took my child in his 20s with very little worldly experience, but he understood social media and branding. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the meeting's over. You earned your hour, even though it's whatever, 20 minutes into it. I ran into the other room and I called my editor. And I said, guess what? Guess what? We're reworking it. You can scrap the first book. She was like, oh my gosh.
Oh my God, this woman's crazy.
Yeah. And so she said, well, I had started a mental health chapter, and she said, you can take some of that. And I had audio recorded my very first workshop. So I had it transcribed. And so that was the layering that I did for the book, and that informed the chapters. And I woke up and I was going to do 2 books. I was going to do a book and a workbook. And it got to be too crazy. What goes in this book and what goes in that book? And you know how you get inspirations in the morning? I woke up one morning and said, workbook, the word workbook was just flying around me. And I'm like, oh, we're doing a workbook. We're only doing 1 book. We're pouring it all into there. And so this is a real workbook with exercises and lines and questions you can answer, work at your leisure. I do sell an editable PDF. So people can, if they really love working on a device, they can work on the device and save their work. I personally love a real book, but it has 3 formats. And yeah, that's very powerful.
Exactly like something I would love, just completely practical. Yeah, exercises right in the book. Don't have to go to a separate book. Beautiful.
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah. So last question. What do you think? I want you to pick an audience. You can pick the women who are burning out. You can pick their partners, their spouses, their bosses, their coworkers, their organizations. You can pick policymakers. Pick an audience and tell them what you think needs to happen so that women are not burning out quite so much as they are.
Put yourself in their shoes, dang it. I mean, this is at the organizational level. Like I said, burnout is a 2-way street. Yes, people need to learn how to work their own self-care, and the organization needs to set it up so that they're not burning out. Managers should be trained in emotional intelligence. I don't have the stats, but most managers are promoted for technical skills, whether it's finance or law. Some of them have an innate sense of emotional intelligence, but many do not. Can you imagine a scientist being emotionally intelligent? I mean, I have a lot of scientist friends, so they know I'm kidding.
So you can say that.
I can say that, yeah. My best friend's husband is a scientist, so, and we're kidding. But it's really, really important to be connected to the people on a human level, to be aware of your own words and the way you come across and how much time and energy and care you put into your people. It's important to treat your people like the way you would treat your children, with love and respect. You don't have to walk around saying, I love you, but you do have to get to know them on a personal level. For example, do you know the names of the 2 most important people in their life? Do you know what their children's hobbies are? Do you know if they're caring for any sick relatives? What do you know about the people that are around you? Do you ever take your employees to lunch? And right now it's virtual, I understand that, but do you ever take them to lunch and say, what books are you reading? What movies are you watching? What are you doing this weekend for fun? Let's talk about fun. Do you do any team volunteer projects together just to get out of the office? And I know, again, we're still dealing with COVID, but you can do a park cleanup. It's outdoors. You could do a park cleanup or a beach cleanup together. There's so many things you can do. You can pack lunches for kids. There's a million things you can do together as a team that's not just specifically work related. That's how you really bond with people emotionally, and you get people to trust you because you develop a trust with them.
2-way street again. Yes, beautiful.
That's
Thank you.
2-way street.
So tell us where to find Janice Litvin and her book and her workshops. Where can we find you?
Okay, so my website is janicelitvin.com. My book is at janicelitvin.com/book. You can download a free chapter. And there is a page called Speaking. You can see I have a lot of videos on my homepage. There's a demo video. On my videos page, there are short little 2-minute videos that are just me answering different questions, one video, one question to each video. There are many testimonials. You can join my mailing list if you want. I don't send a lot of emails. I write a blog a week, and just get in touch and say hi.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Janice.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.